Christopher Lafayette is an emerging technologist in virtual and augmented reality, applying his talent to medtech, climate, and applied sciences. He is working for a more equitable future in technology, serving as a Silicon Valley national and international speaker, thought leader, and a culture and inclusion advocate. He really walked the talk. Chris, please welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Rosario, for that introduction. I'm so happy to be in your presence once again here at AWE, Augmented World Expo, where we find ourselves with an opportunity to assemble once again. For those that are with us today by way of virtual, we know exactly where you're coming from. As we find ourselves here, Santa Clara Convention Center, I just find it outstanding and be remiss in not saying that this time last year, this facility was converted into a compound for the prospects of what might happen with this pandemic that still yet abides. And I'm so happy to be here once again, because sometimes you just never know. All technologies abide within the eco-habitat. You have artificial intelligence. It's flanked by machine learning and deep learning. You have XR, acronym for extended reality, flanked by virtual and augmented reality, haptics, so forth and so on. On the AI side of things, you may find chatbots and smart assistants. And also within the eco-habitat, you may find fintech. In fintech, you find cryptocurrency or crypto assets, blockchains, plural, so forth and so on. Now within this eco-habitat, these technologies abide and they grow. Now, most of these technologies, they're not new per se. A lot of these have been envisioned decades ago, some even centuries ago. But now, we're now imbued with the opportunity and the power to pursue the things that were only found in the confines, the imaginations of women and men. Within this eco-habitat, these emerging technologies are scaling. But what happens when these technologies begin to merge and they begin to pair together? Well, that's what we call the merge pairing, which what we see demonstrated before our eyes is fundamental constructs of the smart city, which inevitably will lead us to technological convergence. Now, remember, technology moves in three phases: increments, shifts, and leaps. Now, the idea of an increment is something like an update to an iOS system. Now, a lot of people, they'll attend an Apple event or watch it and say, that's another same iPhone. They haven't been invented in years. Well, trade your iPhone 12 for an iPhone 4, and we'll see just how far we've progressed. Now, beyond the incrementation is the shift. And with the shift, we usually look at hardware updates. HMDs for head-mounted displays, phones and tablets, desktop, laptops, so forth and so on. But then we have leaps, and those come rare. The internet, the cloud. When you deal with the leap, all these technologies that are under that specific mainframe impact entire civilizations on this planet Earth. And no doubt has the internet not influenced business and consumer alike. The cloud has undoubtedly impacted business and consumer alike. But now we find ourselves with an emerging technology that's not new. Now it's being envisioned and invested in. We call that the Metaverse. Some people don't. But nevertheless, it's here. Now today within the Metaverse ecosystem, there are many things that make up the singular metaverse. There's not proto-metaverses. All the platforms that you see that have to do with the metaverse are metaversal. Now, what makes up the metaverse is hardware, software, and people. And the component of this metaverse that we're talking about today in the ecosystems are what we call NFTs. Now, by a show of hands, to get a measurement of the audience, who here has heard of non fungible tokens? Okay, you came to the right party. Now, today, we're seeing a meteoric rise when it comes to non fungible tokens. But first, we must address the elephant in the room. Firstly, NFTs suck. They're bad. They're horrible. They're atrocious to the environment. It's loaded with scams. Just bear with me. Don't hang me yet. They're fraudulent. They're difficult to manage when it comes to legal, arbitration, mediation. It's a whole lot of things that just aren't good with NFTs today. Moreover, the process. NFTs are great. We're seeing an incredible amount of capital being invested and revenue generated for a technology, but by its namesake, is not even a decade old. That's still very much in its infancy. We never see technologies in this capacity in less than a year's time reach the type of financial gain of what we're experiencing today, now, presently. And we're going to address that, and we only have a little bit of time to be able to do it. We have a lot to cover. So NFTs are great. Today, we're going to be covering the overview of NFTs defined. How are NFTs made? Natural versus art assets. There are differences. Where are NFTs stored? NFTs in virtual worlds, relevant industries. I hope you brought your notes because we have a little lesson that's going to be given today. Now, what are NFTs? Non-fungible tokens. Non-fungible tokens that have arisen and they've come to meet us where we're at today. Given the timeline and where we're at presently, 2011, BitDNS. I'm sure there's some that have heard what this is. That was a program that was inspired by Bitcoin. Namesake came from the name coin. Then they made pursuit in developing what we did not know would be an NFT. Then 2014, the avant la lettre, meaning before it was even named or given, there was no name for NFTs. We had colored coins. We had counterparty. We had platforms that were pursuing to find out what ways will we go about using the blockchain? What other differences can we use besides fungible assets, which we now know as cryptocurrencies? Now, the ones that are in big pursuit, the ones that are at the tall order, Bitcoin, and I don't need to raise your hand if any of you have heard of Ethereum. I'm sure you have some maybe tucked away in your pocket now. So Ethereum comes out in 2015 with Etheria. Some of you may have heard of it. And there's been experiments with money that's invested into the blockchain and its use case. Remember, technology is, according to the Gartner's hype cycle, peak of inflated interest, goes down into the trough of disillusionment. Well, we always and sometimes look at the trough of disillusionment as failure. But oftentimes, for great technologies to arise, they must come from failed data. That's part of the natural cycle and growth of a technology itself. Now, what's happened is that NFTs, unnamed, found themselves in the trough of disillusionment. But something has happened. It's not like 2021 was the first time that an NFT was made. NFTs were made some years ago. But why all of a sudden do we find ourselves in a situation 2021 with the great boom? I mean, standards were set all the way back in 2017. 721 ERC. There's 1150 ERC. Standards were already set for developers and protocols. But why now, all of a sudden, have we seen this meteoric rise when it comes to NFTs? I mean, blockchains have a role in this, obviously. But when you look at the different blockchains that are erecting now, we have proof of work, which is the nasty one a lot of people don't like, but it's the most pursued one. It's causing a lot of energy. But we have to go through this natural cycle. Apple wasn't the size of your iPad at one point. Then we have proof of stake. And now what we see on the horizon is proof of history. So there's different types of blockchains, plural, that are out there. Now we're going this way for a reason. Bear with me, walk with me. So now why all of a sudden do we see such a meteoric rise? With the first 3 quarters of this year, $2.5 billion in revenue generated. Not just the deal that happened with Beeple. $2.5 billion generated. Then all of a sudden, we come to Q3 of 2021, not 2019, not 2018, Q3 of 2021, a 700% increase in capital raised, revenue generated for this thing that 98% of the world has no idea what it is. And that 98% isn't necessarily under the auspices of consumers. We're talking about 98% that also includes enterprise, and not industries outside of technology, well within technology. They're wrapping their minds around how is it that we approach this meteoric thing called the NFT. Now, let's leap to the Metaverse, which today we can assuredly say of a manifestation that's readily available to go now of the Metaverse are virtual worlds. But before we go there, we must talk about how are NFTs made. First of all, the NFT, the Non Fungible Token, it's data that's able to be time-stamped of where it's at. The NFT is something that you have that's unique to you, a unique asset. It's likened unto a baseball card or a basketball card, perhaps a shirt, perhaps some type of item that you have that you want to translate and bring it to the digital world. That can happen now. And what people are finding is that assets that are out there, or these design assets, not just basketball cards, but whole entire chunks of real estate are being purchased and bought by platforms such as Decentraland. Who here has heard of Decentraland? Okay. Now, there was a time ago, just years ago, where I, here natively in Silicon Valley, we looked at Decentraland as just something to do, oh, it's a fun experiment. The experiments are receding. The reality is that in the last 18 months, we've become more virtual than we had the past 10 years. And that we've done more transactions, conversations, communications in the last 18 months than we have the last 20 years. And that the greatest development of growth of technology within the eco-habitat of all the technologies that's been developed. People ask me this, Chris, what is the greatest technology that's been developed over the last decades and years? It's quite easy and quite simple because we all were presented with the situation that we did not know that was arriving. Yet we found ourselves in a giant case study and everyone had to participate. It's called a pandemic. Now, the greatest form of technology that's been developed over the last several decades is communication. We've been able to take the power of the internet into the cloud. But now we came and enrolled ourselves into this virtual mechanism where the world has decided to tell us how they want to be sold. And so you've heard the word more virtual beyond your peers out of the mouths of CNN anchors or MSNBC or those other stations, or all different types of people that are talking virtual this and virtual that. Zoom didn't just arrive in 2020 of March. Now let's take a look at this for a moment. And this bears worth consideration. Why is it in 2021 have NFTs meteorically risen? The answer is this, that in technology, great technologies supersede old technologies, and this is part of what we call the disrupt. But never have we been in a time, contemporary our time, or the ages and dispensations of time, have been in a situation in the modern age where a pandemic has served as a greater disrupt. It's by way of this pandemic that has ushered in virtual, that has given us more time to think and consider how we work in this new remote world. Look around you, the world has changed and we are firmly in it. Distributed remote world, hybrid world, how we go about communicating and transactions. It's completely changed. We realize that by sitting inside of a Zoom conference or a Hangouts of Blue Jeans, that we can do more. And so the world is convinced. And now we see multiple billions of dollars being invested for the very thing that we're in here now. And somehow, some way, NFTs have found itself in this narrative. Now, where are these NFTs stored? Now, when someone purchases an NFT, it's stored on data within a blockchain. That could be Ethereum, that could be Cardano, that could be other chains that are out there. And it's stored there, or it's stored in a hardware device in your wallet. You can have MetaMask, which is your virtual device. Trust. Now, I'm not giving any financial advice. This is just what I've heard. But virtual worlds, where we're at today and where we find ourselves, this is where the game will change. I'm often asked, Chris, what is the metaverse? What is the known metaverse? Not the Socrates, the Plato, the I dream one day the metaverse to be, not a LinkedIn post metaverse, not a Twitter or tweet post of a metaverse, not even Mark Zuckerberg's version of the metaverse. What is the metaverse today? The metaverse are virtual worlds. And the activity that's happening in these virtual worlds have to do with gaming, have to do with education, have to do with ownership. Now, the biggest pursuit in the way that we bring consumers into virtual worlds today, and the greatest opportunity that presents itself, is just that, ownership. When I go into Facebook and I operate in any type of area within Facebook, I own none of that. Now, when I go into a virtual world and there's communities that are centralized or communities that I make, you mean to tell me that I have the opportunity to go into this virtual environment and actually own some of it? And on top of that, you mean to tell me not only can I own it, I could turn around and sell this property that I own by some world, some gal or guy made, and I could turn around and sell it for a profit. You mean to tell me that I could be an artist or a creator and create an asset, migrate it into this virtual world, flex it for people to see or use, and I could sell it to somebody, and that person could sell it to someone else, and retroactively, I can get paid for it. Yeah. But there's a problem. There's a lot of slips in the cracks. When people tell me, where are we at with NFTs today? Have we arrived to the greatness of its original intent? And the question emphatically is no, we haven't. There are scams that are quite prevalent. There are people that have found ways to make this technology predatory. There are transactions that aren't heavily monitored with a legal sense. Litigators are gearing up for a cacophony of a situation that they've never been up against. You see, the thing is that technology moves quicker than the US government. It's more advanced. And when you have a technology that jumps on the scene that reaches to $11 billion plus in less than 1 year's time, government's not going to know what to do with that. The private industry is not going to know what to do with that. But the ones that are sitting in this room, in this event, that are watching live with us today, we will know something to do with that. And so we're geared with the responsibility. You have platforms like SteamOS that said, no longer are we letting people be able to do blockchains within our environment. We're not taking it. Epic says, we may give it a try. Ecosystems can be negatively impacted by what we bring and migrate into it. But at some point, we must consider to look at NFTs not as the pursuit of the next blue chip opportunity. Not everyone's making a $69 million deal like Beeple. In fact, the majority of the people that are submitting their NFTs on OpenSea, which I call lost at sea, because let's be honest, when you put your NFT there, barely anyone even takes a look at it. What's happening? Who's actually making and generating this revenue of this $11 billion thus far? It's moving so fast that it's even difficult to track. So what I'm admonishing to the industry as a whole and to the global world that is watching and that will hear this, I am challenging our industry to do better. We must take humanity first when we start to look at the narrative of NFTs or anything else that we may find ourselves bringing into the ecosystem called the Metaverse. Now, I understand that this is an unpopular opinion or even a distribution. Maybe you didn't come here. Maybe you wanted to find what's the hottest NFT. There's plenty of YouTube people that can give you better than what I can give you on that. But here's the reality, that if we don't have more regulation and more caution in this technology that's been developed, we will find ourselves with a damaged environment in the metaverse, and it's not what it is that I want to hand over to the next generation that comes after us. At some point, we have to have our leaders within the XR industry that is able to identify the use cases of not just NFTs, but other technologies that abide within the eco-habitat on how we are going to operate therein. Now, there are relevant industries that we're looking at within this specific ecosystem. Fashion. Fashion arguably has one of the biggest roles to play in NFTs. Remember and just consider, whatever it is that you see physically is a digital reflection of possibility in the metaverse. The attraction is there. If you have an avatar, I don't want to maybe go in and rock the fashion that's in most of the avatars available today. No offense, Horizon and Altspace, I think that we can do better. As a designer and as an artist, and as someone in the fashion industry, I can bring in a whole ensemble via Spiga, Prada, Gucci. They are all making stakes and claims into these virtual worlds and getting ready to migrate massive wardrobes and ensembles for people to consume. No longer do I have to have the same jetpack or virtual flowers as someone else. Now I can have my own sense of identity. This is where we're getting ready to head into. We've become more virtual, and therefore in business, this is where we'll start to make our business decisions virtually. You will one day wake up, and you will one day put on your HMD or your AR glasses, and you will go to work for an 8-hour shift, and that is the extent of your commute. But how you go in there can be as unique as it was if you walked into your space physically. With all these industries that will impact what it is that we're doing, and the marketplaces are gearing up, we're seeing celebrities, people, and companies, Tom Brady, Jay-Z, Venus Williams. We're seeing all different types of people coming out with their own platforms. Steve Aoki. You're seeing now they're realizing this is where I want to put my money in. If you look at platforms like Autograph, if you look at platforms like Bitsky, they're creating their own SDKs and saying, hey, we're going to make it as simple for you not only to enjoy autonomy within our virtual worlds, but we're going to take it a step further so that you can create your own virtual world, your own marketplaces, and your own NFT asset distribution. This is real, and this is where we're at. We've never seen a technology generate this type of revenue as fast as it has. Now, NFTs are still emerging. And the reality is, we have a lot more work to do than the progress that we've made. I want us to put a lid on the rhetoric that I hear of its success and be honest with ourselves in saying that if we do not get this right, this can run rampant and spill over into everything that we do. Why? Because the consumer is only forgiving for so long. We have to have systems of privacy, security, education, equal for all. Humanity first in everything that we build, in the pursuit of non-fungible tokens and everything that we have to offer to the world that does not know where we're headed. I'll say this and then I'll be done. Consider where you were at March 2020, the height of the pandemic beginning to grow. There were whole entire industries that did not know the next steps. As quiet as it is kept, it is the brilliant minds in spaces like these that have been laying down the foundation unknowingly for cataclysmic situations that we found ourselves in. Now, with all that we've just experienced, and in some parts are still experiencing, what more and what should we do with the time that is given? Now is the time to build better, and we're met with a unique and incredible opportunity to bring everyone into this space, to guide them, and to create the best foundation to the metaverse as we can. And at the center of the metaverse itself is not technology. Technology and ecosystems isn't hardware and software. Technology is people. And at the heart of the metaverse is community. So in the pursuit of NFTs, may you have success with your endeavors and everything that you're building. But in my heart to you, I hope that you, by way of this challenge and inspiration, will build better, putting humanity first before the metaverse. And then we will find ourselves successful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Any question from the audience, please? One hand, second hand.
You referred to that there was NFTs for real estate.
Yes.
Could you expand on that?
Sure. So where we find ourselves when it comes to real estate and NFTs, you have platforms like Decentraland and others that have been inspired a lot by Ethereum and the prospects of ownership. When we think about the big ticket ownership things that we own in the earth plane, if you will, or in the meatverse, when we think about what are some of the biggest purchases that we'll make in a given lifetime: automobile, housing. So when we think about the digital metaverse, what we're simply doing is reflecting what we see with consumer habits and consumption habits now, be it commercial or residential, translated into what we call virtual worlds. And in these virtual worlds, you have those that have created the grid system, whether it's based on the ones that we have in real time in the world, or they're creating their own grid systems and their whole geo mapping systems. Niantic is really good at this. And they're creating their own geo mapping systems. And they're saying, hey, you want to buy some property in Manhattan that you'll never be able to buy in person? We got something for you. And if you see the value in that, then they'll sell it to you. But here's the deal. A lot of people are making, I think, to some degree, the wise investments, even apart from NFTs, even through marketplaces of investing now. Some people look at these virtual worlds and say, that's not really virtually or visually compelling. But keep in mind, metahumans just jumped on the scene this year, and I would submit to you that I think that that's a very compelling narrative visually. Remember, we're still in the design side of things of our industry dealing with perceptual science. We're dealing with human factor ergonomics, visual fidelity, cognitive fidelity, so forth and so on. So in order for us to be able to appreciate what it is that we're about to see, it'll only get better over time. The more power that we're afforded, the more visualization that we're able to put out, and the more convincing that it will be to one day we'll be sitting in an augmented world expo room, having a discussion in human eye resolution, haptic feedback handshakes, and none of us got on a plane.
Thank you. Any other question? Please.
Yeah, thank you very much. So you said NFTs is about ownership, but to be honest, what you own the hash of the NFT right now. When you mint an NFT, you don't own the JPEG or the video or the 3D model itself. What you have control on, the hash, which you own, and you have the private key to move it or sell it. So how can you elaborate on how I can prove I own the hash of an NFT, but I cannot prove I own the JPEG originally. Don't you see some kind of challenge here?
I am 100% in agreement with you. Copyright issues is a huge situation that we're facing when it comes to actual and legitimately ownership. How do we justify ownership? How do we say, okay, I own this asset by way of this technology, but owning it according to whose laws, whose guilds, whose rights? Graphic artist guilds have old laws, and how have they married up and migrated with this technology? The reason I like your question so much is because it speaks to the honesty and legitimacy of where we're at, that technology moves more advanced in standards and protocols and governmental laws that have been laid down. We are exceeding by way of technology and to disrupt. No one saw this coming. Maybe a few people. I give you credit if you did, but not to this degree. And so that's just one of many within that stew that needs to be addressed. I welcome your question.
Well, last question.
Yeah, in terms of NFTs that are already pre-existing on non-metaverse platforms, how do you see metaverses selling NFTs in virtual worlds, and then pre-existing NFTs being integrated into virtual worlds for sale?
Classic marketing 101, product delivery. I go back to Simon Sinek, people don't buy products and services, they buy culture. I think a number of reasons we see so much failure, which is fine within platforms like OpenSea, Rarible, maybe even perhaps super rare. And someone says, I converted an NFT, I put it on an OpenSea, I haven't sold anything. In fact, I haven't even enjoyed traffic. Well, people don't buy products and services, they buy culture. We have to go back to first principles and be able to bring the marketers in the room. If you just have a designer and a developer and a willing heart to go out there, you're only ever going to get so far. We neglect time and again the power of marketing and, quite frankly, salesmanship. We have to make sure that we have that and a reason and give people an inspiration to even buy a certain thing, to even have fidelity for the assets that we're creating and curating. What's good about where we're at today is we now have data, and we're able to go back and do a gap analysis, a listening landscape to find out where we've been. When the internet first started, we weren't enjoying this type of data that we have now. Now we have a lot of data on what to do and what not to do. So I recommend people going back to first principles, bringing your marketing team in there and giving people a reason to want to buy it. So how are things and assets going to be sold in the metaverse? Inspiration of culture.
Well, thank
Peace.
you very much, Chris.